Listen, have you ever noticed that the moment someone starts to matter the most, that's exactly when they begin to pull away? It's confusing, it's painful, and if you've been on the receiving end, you've probably asked yourself, why would someone push me away when I'm the one they want? Here's the truth. It's not about rejection. It's about protection. An avoidant personality has learned somewhere along the way that closeness equals danger. They built walls not because they don't care, but because caring deeply terrifies them. Imagine this, you're standing at the edge of the ocean. The water is beautiful, powerful, and calling you in. But if you've ever been caught in a wave before, nearly drowning, that same ocean feels like a threat. Love feels like that ocean for avoidance, magnetic yet terrifying. When emotions rise, their nervous system screams, get control, step back, don't let them in too close. So, what looks like distance is often a desperate attempt to survive the flood of vulnerability. But here's the empowering part. This is not permanent. Patterns can be broken. The cycle can shift. Awareness is the first breakthrough. When you understand that their distance is fear, not lack of love, you stop personalizing it. You stop reacting with anger, and instead you respond with strength and compassion. And for the avoidant, the transformation begins when you decide to face that fear head on. The very thing you're running from, intimacy, is the key to the fulfillment you've been starving for. Freedom is not found in walls, but in courage. So if you've been pushing people away when you want them the most, remember this: your heart is not fragile, it's powerful. You don't need to hide it. The deeper the connection you allow, the stronger you become. And if you're loving someone who struggles with avoidance, don't confuse distance with disinterest. Stand firm, create safety, and invite honesty. Because when fear meets love, love wins, every single time. Avoidants fear vulnerability, not connection. This is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in relationships because on the surface it looks like avoidance is rejection, like they don't want closeness, love, or intimacy. But in reality, it's not that they don't want connection, it's that vulnerability feels dangerous to them. Somewhere along the line they learned, consciously or unconsciously, that letting people in comes with pain, disappointment, or loss of control. So they build walls, they keep distance, they create a buffer between their heart and the people who try to reach it. And yet, beneath those defenses, what they crave is exactly what they push away: love, belonging, and safety in connection. Think about it. Vulnerability means opening yourself up to another person, showing your emotions, expressing your needs, revealing your weaknesses. For someone who has experienced rejection, betrayal, or emotional neglect in the past, this exposure feels terrifying. It's like standing in front of a crowd completely naked with no armor, no protection, hoping you won't be judged, mocked, or abandoned. For avoidance, the very act of letting someone close threatens their sense of safety. So even when they desire closeness, their nervous system screams to protect them, and that protection often looks like silence, withdrawal, or even pushing the other person away. But here's where the paradox lies. Avoidants are not cold-hearted. They're not incapable of love. In fact, their desire for connection runs deep, sometimes deeper than they're willing to admit even to themselves. The struggle is that the closer they get to someone, the more their fear of vulnerability is activated. Love, instead of feeling safe, starts to feel risky. The more they want you, the more they fear losing you. The more they open up, the more they fear being hurt. So they lean into what feels safe, pulling away, shutting down, controlling the distance. It's not because they don't care. It's because they care so much that it overwhelms them. When we understand this dynamic, everything changes. Instead of personalizing their withdrawal as they don't love me, or I'm not enough, we can see it as they're scared of vulnerability. This perspective empowers us to respond with compassion instead of frustration. It doesn't mean tolerating unhealthy behavior, but it does mean recognizing that their fear isn't a reflection of our worth. It's a reflection of their internal battle. For the avoidant, breaking this cycle starts with courage. The courage to lean into discomfort, to recognize that vulnerability is not weakness but strength. Every meaningful relationship is built on trust, and trust requires risk. Yes, there's always a chance of being hurt, But there's also the possibility of experiencing love on a deeper level than ever before. Growth is not found in the walls we build, but in the bridges we dare to cross. Avoidants fear vulnerability because vulnerability reminds them of the times they felt powerless. But real power doesn't come from control. It comes from authenticity, from the ability to be seen and accepted for who you are without the mask, without the walls. When an avoidant learns that intimacy is not a threat but a gift, when they practice opening up little by little, their relationships transform. They stop running from love and start allowing it to heal the very wounds that made them afraid in the first place. Connection is what we all crave, and avoidants are no different. They don't fear love. They fear what love exposes. But when they embrace vulnerability, they discover that the very thing they've been running from is the doorway to the fulfillment they've been searching for all along. The closer they feel, the more exposed they become. This is the paradox of avoidant behavior, and it explains why the people who matter most to them often experience the greatest distance. At first, in the early stages of connection, things can feel light, safe, even exciting. There's curiosity without too much pressure, closeness without deep vulnerability. But as the bond grows stronger, as the emotions deepen, something shifts inside them. That sense of exposure begins to rise. It's no longer just about enjoying someone's company. It's about being seen, being known, being understood on a level that feels almost too real. And with that realization, fear begins to whisper, what if they see too much? What if I lose myself? What if they hurt me? Closeness requires transparency. To let someone in means to allow them access to the parts of yourself that you normally keep hidden, the insecurities, the fears, the stories you don't tell. For an avoidant, this feels like standing in the spotlight without armor, and that kind of exposure can be deeply unsettling. It isn't that they don't want to be close. On the contrary, closeness is exactly what they crave. But it comes with a cost, the dismantling of the walls they've spent years building, and when you've relied on those walls for survival, tearing them down feels like self-betrayal. This explains why avoidants often behave in contradictory ways. One moment they are fully present, engaged, affectionate. The next, they pull back, creating emotional distance, as if to regain their balance. It's not because their feelings have changed. It's because the depth of those feelings has triggered their survival instinct. The more they care, the more exposed they feel. The more exposed they feel, the more they retreat. This cycle can be painful for both people involved. The partner feels rejected, confused, and questions whether they are truly loved. The avoidant feels overwhelmed, guilty for pulling back, but also convinced that distance is the only way to preserve their sense of safety. This inner conflict is exhausting, and yet it's important to recognize that this cycle is not about a lack of love. It's about the struggle to reconcile love with vulnerability. The path to growth for an avoidant lies in learning to tolerate that sense of exposure, to recognize that closeness is not an enemy, but an ally. That being seen doesn't mean being judged or abandoned. It means being given the chance to be loved for who they really are. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It requires patience, self-awareness, and a willingness to lean into discomfort. But every time they allow themselves to stay present in that closeness without running, they expand their capacity for intimacy. For their partners, understanding this pattern is crucial. When you know that withdrawal is not rejection but a response to feeling exposed, you can respond with empathy instead of defensiveness. You can create an environment where it feels safe to stay, where the avoidant slowly learns that exposure doesn't have to mean danger. And over time, this creates the possibility of a deeper, more authentic bond, one where both people feel seen, valued, and secure. The truth is, exposure is not weakness. It is the pathway to true intimacy. When an avoidant learns to embrace the vulnerability that comes with closeness, they discover a profound freedom, the ability to be loved not for the mask they wear, but for the person they truly are. And in that moment, what once felt terrifying becomes the very thing that heals them. Pushing away is a defense mechanism. To truly understand this, you have to look beyond the surface of behavior and into the emotional patterns that drive it. When someone with avoidant tendencies feels overwhelmed by closeness, their instinct is not to lean in but to create space. That distance is not random, it's a survival strategy. At some point in their past, they learned that vulnerability carried consequences. Maybe they opened up and were rejected. Maybe they trusted and were abandoned. Maybe they depended on someone who couldn't or wouldn't show up for them. Those experiences left a mark, and now their nervous system is wired to protect them the moment intimacy feels too intense. The act of pushing away is a shield, not a weapon. It is not designed to hurt others, though it often does. It is designed to preserve the self. What makes this defense mechanism so confusing is that it operates in the opposite direction of desire. When an avoidant longs for connection, that very longing triggers the fear of losing control. The desire to be close collides with the terror of being exposed, and the internal conflict becomes unbearable. So, they reach for the tool that has always worked, creating distance. It might look like silence, withdrawing from conversations, keeping emotions bottled up, or even physically removing themselves from the relationship dynamic. To the partner, this feels like rejection, but to the avoidant, it feels like survival. They are not rejecting love. They are protecting themselves from what love stirs inside of them. Defenses, by their very nature, are protective but also limiting. Imagine carrying a shield everywhere you go. Yes, it keeps arrows from hitting you, but it also prevents you from reaching out your hand, embracing another, or carrying something precious. The shield gives safety at the cost of connection. And while it worked in the past, in adult relationships, it becomes the very thing that blocks the fulfillment they crave. By pushing away, they avoid the pain of potential rejection, but they also deny themselves the joy of true intimacy. This cycle creates pain for both sides. The partner feels unwanted. Like every attempt at closeness is met with resistance. The avoidant feels trapped, torn between the craving for intimacy and the fear of it. And the harder they push, the more misunderstood they feel. But here's the key. A defense mechanism is not an identity. It is simply a pattern, a learned response. What has been learned can also be unlearned. Awareness is the first step. The moment someone realizes, I'm not actually rejecting love, I'm protecting myself from fear, they begin to reclaim control. They can start asking, is this distance serving me now, or is it robbing me of what I truly want? For the avoidant, the challenge is to replace defense with courage, to practice small steps of openness, to test vulnerability in safe doses, allowing themselves to experience that not every moment of closeness leads to pain. For their partner, the invitation is to see past the shield and recognize the human being behind it. Responding with anger reinforces the fear. Responding with steadiness and empathy helps to solve it. That doesn't mean tolerating neglect or erasing your own needs. It means understanding that the defense is not about you. It's about their inner struggle. The transformation begins when the avoidant realizes that protection and connection don't have to be enemies. True safety is not in withdrawal, but in discovering that they can be vulnerable and still be okay. It's about realizing that love is not a battlefield where they must defend themselves, but a sanctuary where they can lay their weapons down. The shield can be set aside, not because danger is gone, but because they have found the strength to trust again, and in that moment, pushing away is no longer necessary. Instead, they can finally allow themselves to receive the very thing they've been longing for all along. Their greatest desire and greatest fear collide. This is the inner paradox that defines the avoidant experience. On one hand, they crave love, connection, intimacy, and the comfort of being truly seen. On the other hand, those very things trigger their deepest fears. Fear of losing themselves, fear of being abandoned, fear of being controlled, or fear of repeating past wounds. This collision creates an emotional storm inside of them. The closer they get to what they want, the more dangerous it feels. The more they open their heart, the more they sense the risk of it being broken, and so they live in a tug-of-war between approach and retreat, closeness and distance, longing and fear. This internal battle often leads to confusing behaviors. One moment they are warm, loving, and engaged, and the next they are distant, withdrawn, or emotionally unavailable. It isn't because their feelings disappeared, it's because their fear suddenly outweighed their desire. The intensity of intimacy pushes on old scars, and survival instincts kick in. For them, love feels like fire. It brings warmth, light, and life. But if you get too close, it feels like you might get burned. So they hover near it, drawn to it, but when the heat gets too strong, they pull back. This push and pull dynamic is not a reflection of weak character. It's a reflection of the unresolved tension between desire and fear. The greatest tragedy of this collision is that it leaves both people feeling unsatisfied. The avoidant longs for closeness but struggles to fully embrace it. Their partner longs for intimacy but is left feeling shut out. Both sides ache, but for different reasons, and yet, understanding this paradox changes everything. When you recognize that the avoidant is not rejecting you but wrestling with their own internal conflict, it allows you to shift perspective. You see their withdrawal not as a lack of love, but as evidence of how much love actually terrifies them. For the avoidant, healing begins when they confront this paradox head on. The first step is acknowledging that both the desire and the fear are real. Denying one or the other only fuels the cycle. By accepting that I want closeness and I'm afraid of closeness, they begin to shine light on the pattern instead of being controlled by it. The next step is learning to sit with the discomfort of fear without letting it dictate every action. Fear will always whisper warnings, but courage is the ability to move forward despite those whispers. Every time they lean into connection instead of retreating, they weaken the grip of fear. For their partner, the key is patience and boundaries. Patience means giving space when fear takes over without personalizing it as rejection. Boundaries mean holding firm to your own needs, making it clear that love requires mutual openness and presence. This balance of compassion and clarity creates a safe environment where the avoidant can slowly test their courage. It reassures them that intimacy does not have to mean losing themselves, but rather gaining a deeper sense of belonging. The truth is, the collision between desire and fear is not a curse, it's an invitation. It's an opportunity for growth, for transformation, for breaking free from old patterns. Desire is the compass pointing toward what they truly value. Fear is the reminder of the wounds that need healing. When they learn to integrate both, they no longer have to live in conflict. They can allow themselves to want love and to face the fear that comes with it. And in that space of bravery, intimacy becomes not something to avoid, but something to embrace. When their greatest desire and greatest fear collide, it can feel like chaos. But if they dare to walk through that chaos instead of running from it, they discover something profound. Fear doesn't destroy love, it refines it. It teaches resilience, depth, and the power of choosing connection even when it feels risky. And that choice again and again is what transforms fear into freedom. Understanding is power. When you encounter someone who pushes you away even though you know they care, the natural instinct is to take it personally. You might think I'm not enough, or they don't really love me. That interpretation fuels frustration, anger, and self-doubt. But the moment you shift your perspective and recognize that avoidance is not about your worth, but about their fear, everything changes. Knowledge turns into power because it gives you the ability to respond from a place of strength rather than reaction. Instead of escalating the cycle of push and pull, you break it by seeing what's really happening beneath the surface. Avoidant behavior is rooted in self-protection, not in a lack of desire for closeness. When you understand this, you stop trying to force them to open up and instead create an environment that feels safe for openness to naturally emerge. That doesn't mean excusing unhealthy behavior or ignoring your own needs. It means choosing compassion over criticism, curiosity over judgment. You begin to ask yourself different questions. What might they be feeling right now? What fear could be driving this withdrawal? By stepping into that mindset, you remove unnecessary tension from the relationship and give space for growth. Understanding also prevents you from reacting impulsively. Without awareness, their withdrawal may trigger your own defenses. You might chase, demand reassurance, or shut down in return. This creates a cycle where fear feeds fear, distance feeds distance, and both people end up hurt. But when you understand that their silence or retreat is a symptom of inner conflict, you gain the power to pause. Instead of reacting, you can choose a response that supports connection. You might calmly communicate your feelings, hold space without pressure, or set healthy boundaries without hostility. This is the power of perspective. It allows you to lead with intention instead of emotion. For the avoidant, understanding their own patterns is equally powerful. Many live unaware of why they act the way they do. They just know that closeness feels overwhelming, so they step back. But when they learn the psychology behind their behavior, when they realize they're not broken, just conditioned, they unlock the possibility of change. They begin to see that what once kept them safe is now keeping them stuck. With that awareness, they can catch themselves in the moment. I'm pushing away right now not because I don't care, but because I'm scared. That recognition is the first step toward interrupting the cycle. Understanding doesn't erase fear, but it transforms the relationship to fear. Instead of being controlled by it, you start to observe it, name it, and navigate it. This shift creates room for growth on both sides. The partner becomes more patient and steady, the avoidant becomes more aware and brave, and in that space, intimacy has a chance to take root. This is why understanding is power. It gives you choices. Without it, you're stuck in blind reaction. With it, you can decide how to show up, how to hold boundaries, how to communicate, and how to love in a way that doesn't fuel the cycle but breaks it. Knowledge alone doesn't heal relationships, but it equips you with the clarity to act differently. And when actions change, patterns begin to shift. At the heart of every strong relationship is the ability to see beyond the surface, to look past the walls and recognize the human being behind them. Understanding is not about excusing, it's about empowering. It allows you to meet fear with compassion, distance with steadiness, and confusion with clarity. And when both people commit to that awareness, what once felt like an endless cycle of push and pull becomes a path toward deeper trust, mutual respect, and real connection. Transformation starts with awareness. Every cycle of avoidance, every push and pull, every confusing moment of distance has one thing in common. It runs on autopilot until someone becomes aware of it. Awareness is the light that reveals what's been hidden in the shadows. Without it, an avoidant will keep believing that pulling away is the only way to feel safe, and their partner will keep believing that distance means rejection. But when awareness enters the picture, patterns are no longer invisible chains. They become visible choices, and once you see the choice, you have the power to change. For the avoidant, awareness begins with noticing the triggers. It's paying attention to those moments when closeness feels overwhelming, when the instinct to retreat rises. Instead of automatically withdrawing, they can pause and ask, what am I actually feeling right now? Is this fear? Is this discomfort? Is this old conditioning replaying itself? That simple pause interrupts the cycle. It doesn't erase the fear, but it creates space between the fear and the action, and in that space, new decisions become possible. With repeated practice, awareness becomes a tool that loosens the grip of avoidance. For their partner, awareness is equally transformative. It's the realization that the pushback is not about them being unworthy, but about the avoidant's internal battle. This awareness protects them from falling into unnecessary self-doubt or overreacting. Instead of chasing, criticizing, or shutting down, they can respond with clarity and compassion. They can hold healthy boundaries without hostility, and they can choose not to let the cycle define their own emotional state. In this way, awareness empowers both people to break free from the trap of misinterpretation and reaction. Transformation does not happen in a single moment, but awareness creates the foundation for every moment after. Once you become conscious of a pattern, you start catching it earlier each time. At first, it might be after the withdrawal has already happened. Then it might be while you're withdrawing. Eventually, it's before you even take that step. This is how cycles are broken, through gradual layers of awareness leading to new behaviors. The avoidant learns that vulnerability is survivable, that intimacy does not automatically equal danger. The partner learns that patience and steady communication build safety instead of tension. Together, they begin writing a new story. Awareness is also powerful because it dismantles shame. Many avoidants carry the belief that something is wrong with them, that they are flawed for needing distance, that they can't ever fully love. But when they become aware of the psychology behind avoidance, they realize they're not broken, they're conditioned. What they once thought was a permanent defect is actually a learned response. That understanding removes the weight of shame and replaces it with possibility. If it was learned, it can be unlearned. If it was a defense, it can be replaced with courage. This shift in self-perception is life-changing. The same is true for partners who carry insecurities from being pushed away. Awareness shows them that the distance is not proof of their inadequacy. It is not evidence that they are unlovable. It is a reflection of the other person's struggle. This awareness restores self-worth and allows them to engage from a place of strength rather than desperation. When both sides bring awareness into the relationship, they move from blame to understanding, from reaction to choice, from fear to growth. Transformation starts here because without awareness, you can't see the problem clearly enough to change it. With awareness, you shine a light on the cycle and open the door to new possibilities. You stop living in autopilot mode and start living in conscious choice. And when choice enters the equation, healing begins. Awareness doesn't remove the discomfort, but it empowers you to face it. And in facing it, step by step, you build the courage to transform fear into trust, distance into closeness, and avoidance into authentic connection.